Hello, I am Mike.
Hello, I am Lily. Welcome to English Podcast Flow.
Today we're looking at a really interesting topic.
Yeah.
One that I think a lot of you are going to relate to,
Mm-hmm.
especially if you've ever, tried to learn a new language as an adult, like
Yep.
I have.
Yeah.
And we've all heard about how babies just pick up their native language
Right.
just so easily
Like magic.
through exposure and interaction. It
Yeah.
just seems so natural for them.
It does. It makes you wonder if there's some secret that they have that we've lost as adults.
Yeah. And so in this podcast, we're asking that question. Can adults learn English like babies do,
Yeah.
naturally and without getting,
Right.
totally bogged down with the rules and the textbooks and all that stuff?
Yeah. That's a great question. And it's one that researchers have been exploring for a really long time.
Yeah.
And what's fascinating is that studies show that babies have this incredible advantage when it comes to language acquisition.
Yeah.
Their brains are so plastic, meaning they can form new neural connections at just an incredible speed.
So they're like primed for language learning
Yeah.
right from the get-go.
Yes, exactly, like little sponges,
Those sponges.
soaking it all up.
Yeah.
They're constantly surrounded by language, right?
Yeah.
Hearing it spoken by their caregivers, family members, everybody around them.
And it's not just passive listening either.
Yeah.
It appears that babies are actively trying to make sense of the sounds that they're hearing
Right.
and connect those to the world around them.
Absolutely. They're recognizing patterns in the speech, identifying words, and eventually piecing together phrases and sentences.
It's pretty amazing when you think about it.
It is. It really is.
They go from like gurgling and babbling
Yeah.
to forming these coherent sentences
Yeah.
in such a short amount of time.
Yeah.
And they're doing it without consciously learning grammar rules.
Yeah, it's truly incredible. They absorb it organically, just through repeated exposure and interaction.
Yeah.
And this brings up a point that often trips up adult learners.
Mm-hmm.
It's the fear of making mistakes.
Oh.
Babies, they just don't have that. They're not self-conscious about getting things wrong.
They're fearless.
Yes.
They just dive in and experiment with different sounds and words.
Mhm.
And actually that fearlessness
Right?
really helps them learn.
Exactly. It accelerates their learning.
Yeah, it shows you how our mindset can really influence our progress.
Absolutely.
So the big question is, can we as adults tap into that natural learning process?
Right.
Can we learn English like babies do, even though our brains aren't quite as
Right.
malleable as they used to be?
Well, the good news is that yes, we can. While we may not have the same neurological advantages as infants, adults can still adopt some of those key principles of baby learning
Okay.
to enhance their language acquisition journey.
So let's unpack that.
Yeah.
What are some of those key principles, and how can we practically apply them to our own English learning?
One of the most crucial elements, and one we've touched upon already, is immersion. Just like babies, we need to surround ourselves with the language as much as possible. Imagine creating a little English-speaking bubble around yourself where English is constantly present.
Okay. So does that mean, like, I should be listening to English podcasts, music conversations,
Mm-hmm.
even if I don't understand everything that's being said?
Yes,
Yeah.
precisely. It's about training your ears to recognize different sounds and patterns.
Okay.
And studies show that even passive listening can have a significant impact
Really?
on language acquisition. It's like your brain is working in the background, absorbing information, even when you're not consciously aware of it.
Interesting. So it's like when I'm listening to English radio in the background
sure
while I'm
is.
doing other things.
Does
My
it-
brain's actually soaking up more than I realize.
It likely is.
Hmm.
Now, another area where adults often stumble is overthinking, particularly when it comes to grammar rules.
Oh, yeah.
We tend to get bogged down in the technicalities instead of just letting the language flow.
Yeah, I'm totally guilty of that. I remember spending hours just poring over grammar books, trying
Yeah.
to memorize every single rule and just feeling completely overwhelmed.
Right.
Like I was trying to build a house starting with the roof instead of the foundation.
Yeah, that's a perfect analogy. And it highlights the difference between how babies and adults approach language.
Uh-huh.
Babies learn by doing, by imitating and experimenting, without worrying about the intricacies of grammar.
So are you saying we need to just silence that inner critic and just start speaking?
Yes.
Even if we make mistakes, just focus on fluency rather than perfect accuracy.
Especially in the early stages. Yes.
Okay, so it's like learning to walk before you run.
Exactly.
You wouldn't expect a baby to just start sprinting right away.
No, you wouldn't.
So we need to build up our confidence and fluency through practice and then kind of refine the details as we go along.
Exactly.
But what about people who don't have native English speakers to talk to regularly?
Right.
What are some practical ways that we can practice speaking in those situations?
Well, there are a lot of great resources available, both online and offline. You could look for language exchange partners,
Okay.
either locally or through online platforms. There
Right.
are also many online tutoring platforms where you can find qualified English teachers.
Right.
And don't underestimate the power of talking to yourself in English.
Talking to yourself in English, that's a good one.
It is.
It might sound silly, but I can see how that would be helpful.
Yeah.
You can narrate your day, describe what you're doing,
Yes.
have imaginary conversations.
Absolutely. And the more you do it, the more natural it will feel. Another technique I highly recommend is shadowing. Have you ever tried that?
Shadowing. I don't think so.
So it involves listening to a native English speaker and repeating what they say as closely as possible,
Okay.
trying to match their pronunciation, rhythm, and intonation.
So it's like mimicking or echoing what you hear.
Exactly. Becoming a vocal shadow of the speaker.
Okay, I like that. And what kind of materials can you use for that?
Pretty much anything. Podcasts, audiobooks, movies, TV shows, speeches, anything where you have a clear audio track of a native speaker. Choose something that you enjoy listening to because
Yeah.
that's going to make the process more enjoyable and keep you motivated.
Right, so if I were to shadow like a scene from my favorite English movie,
Yes.
I would basically listen to a line, pause the audio, and then try to repeat it exactly how the actor said it.
Yes, exactly. Pay attention not just to the words themselves, but to the intonation, the pauses, the emphasis, all those subtle elements that contribute to natural sounding speech.
Yeah, that sounds like a fun and challenging exercise. I'm
Yeah.
definitely going to try that. I can see how that would train your listening and speaking skills.
It does simultaneously.
It really does. And the more you practice, the better you'll become at mimicking those nuances of native speech. Now let's move on to another key principle of baby learning that we can adapt, focusing on phrases rather than individual words.
Ah, that's interesting. I've always struggled with vocabulary learning, trying to memorize long lists of words.
But it appears that babies don't learn language that way at all.
No, they don't. They learn in chunks, picking up phrases and expressions that they hear repeatedly in specific contexts. They learn the language in context, not in isolation,
Oh.
which makes it much more meaningful.
So instead of just learning the word apple, I should learn phrases like, I would like an apple.
Exactly.
Or can I have an apple, please?
Yes.
That way I'm learning it in a real-life context.
Exactly. And by learning phrases, you're not only expanding your vocabulary, but you're also developing your understanding of grammar and syntax without even realizing it.
Wow, it's like learning English through osmosis.
Yes.
You're absorbing it naturally, just like babies do,
Right.
by focusing on these meaningful chunks rather than individual words.
Exactly. And this brings us to another important element of baby learning that we often overlook as adults,
Okay.
the importance of play and having fun.
Yeah. I remember when my niece was learning to talk, she didn't see it as a chore or a lesson. It was all about playing with sounds and experimenting with words and having fun with language.
Absolutely. It's how they explore the world, make sense of their surroundings, and develop their cognitive and linguistic skills.
Yep.
And the same principle applies to language learning for adults. When we're engaged, curious, and having fun,
Yeah.
our brains are far more receptive to new information.
So if we want to learn English like babies,
Yeah.
we need to find ways to make it enjoyable, playful, and engaging.
Right.
Ditch the dry textbooks.
Yes.
And find activities that spark our interest and make us want to learn.
Exactly. There are endless possibilities. You could play English language games, sing English songs, watch English movies, read children's books.
Yeah.
Anything that captures your imagination and makes you feel good while learning.
It's so easy to get caught up in the seriousness of language learning
Right.
that we forget to just have fun with it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We need to remember that just like babies, we learn best when we're enjoying the process.
I think that's a great point.
Yeah.
So important to remember.
It's amazing how much more readily we learn when we're enjoying ourselves, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. It's like our brains become more receptive to new information
Right.
when we're in that positive and relaxed state.
Exactly.
And it reminds me of something else we talked about earlier.
Yeah.
The idea of creating an immersive, English-rich environment for ourselves.
Yeah.
Much like the language-soaked world that babies naturally inhabit.
Yes, and that's where the real magic happens. When we can surround ourselves with the language just like babies do, our brains go into overdrive, making connections and absorbing patterns without us even realizing it.
It's like we're tapping into that innate language learning capacity that we all possess, the one that allowed us to learn our first language so effortlessly.
Exactly. It appears that our brains are wired for this kind of immersive learning. It's how we're designed to acquire language.
So let's delve into the practicalities of this. What are some concrete steps we can take to create this immersive environment for ourselves? I mean, I'm imagining it's about making English a constant presence in our lives.
Right.
But where do we even begin?
Well, a great starting point is to take stock of how you currently interact with language in your daily life.
Okay.
Think about what you read, watch, listen to, and who you talk to.
Mm-hmm.
Once you have a clear picture of your current language landscape, you can start making small but significant changes.
So if I'm used to, for example, reading the news in my native language,
Mm-hmm.
I could try switching to an English language news source,
Yes,
even if it's just for a few minutes each day.
precisely. And you can apply that same principle to other areas as well. If you enjoy watching movies, challenge yourself to watch one in English. Even if you need to use subtitles initially, you're still hearing the language and seeing it visually, which reinforces your learning.
Studies show that even watching with subtitles can be beneficial, right?
Versa.
Because you're getting that dual input of audio and visual language.
It's all about increasing your exposure to the language in as many ways as possible.
And what about music? I'm a big music lover, and I've always found that listening to songs in English has helped me pick up new words and phrases. Is that something you'd recommend?
Absolutely. Music is a fantastic tool for language learning because it's engaging, enjoyable, and often repetitive, which helps with memorization.
Mm-hmm.
It can also be a great way to improve your pronunciation and get a feel for the natural rhythm and intonation of the language.
Yeah, I find myself singing along to my favorite English songs, even if I don't always get the words right.
Right.
Is it important to just not be afraid to make mistakes and just have fun with it?
Yes, absolutely. Don't be afraid to sing out loud, even if you make mistakes. The more you practice, the more comfortable you'll become. And remember, enjoying the process is key. Now, in addition to changing your media consumption habits,
Okay.
there's another powerful way to create an immersive English environment: connecting with other English speakers.
Right.
Yeah.
Having actual conversations is such a crucial part of language learning, isn't it? But what if you don't have many opportunities to speak English in your daily life?
That's a common challenge, but there are ways around it. You could join an English conversation group,
Okay.
either online or in person, which gives you a chance to practice your speaking skills in a supportive environment.
Yeah.
Or you could find a language exchange partner, someone who's learning your native language and wants to practice English with you.
Oh, that's a great idea. It's a win-win situation. You both get to learn from each other and practice your target languages.
Exactly. And there are also many online platforms and apps that facilitate language exchanges, making it easier than ever to connect with people from all over the world.
Technology has really opened up so many possibilities for language learning, hasn't it?
It really has.
It's like having a whole world of English speakers at your fingertips.
And speaking of technology, there are also some simple tech tweaks you can make to
Okay.
create a more immersive English environment right on your devices.
Interesting. What kind of tweaks are we talking about? Like changing the language settings on my phone?
Yes. Start by changing the language settings on your phone, computer, and other devices to English. It may seem like a small change, but it forces you to interact with the language more frequently, even if it's just for basic tasks like checking your email or browsing the internet.
I hadn't thought of that before, but it makes perfect sense. It's about making those little everyday interactions with technology another opportunity to engage with English.
Exactly. And you can also install language learning apps on your phone, which provide a variety of interactive exercises, games, and activities to help you learn new vocabulary, grammar, and pronunciation.
There's such a wealth of resources available these days, isn't there?
There is.
It's almost overwhelming.
It can be. But the good news is that many of these resources are free or very affordable, making language learning more accessible than ever before.
So there's really no excuse not to create a more immersive English environment for ourselves, is there? We have all the tools and resources we need right at our fingertips.
Precisely. Now, it's one thing to sprinkle these English elements into your life, but the real key to creating a truly immersive experience is to make it a habit, a part of your daily routine,
Right.
just like brushing your teeth or taking a shower.
It's about making language learning a non-negotiable part of your day,
Yes.
not something you just squeeze in when you have spare time.
Exactly. Even if it's just for 15 or 20 minutes each day, the consistency is what matters. It's like you're training your brain to be in English mode for a certain period each day, which strengthens those neural pathways and accelerates your learning.
It's like building a muscle, isn't it?
Precisely.
The more you use it, the stronger it gets.
And over time, those short bursts of immersion will start to add up, and you'll notice a significant improvement in your language skills.
This brings up an interesting question, though. What if you're someone with a really busy schedule and limited free time?
Right?
How can you incorporate these immersive techniques into a jam-packed day? It feels like a challenge a lot of people face.
That's a great question, and one that I think resonates with many people. The key is to be creative and find those small pockets of time throughout your day where you can sneak in some English exposure. Think about your daily routine. Are there any activities where you could multitask and listen to something in English?
So, for instance, I could listen to an English podcast while I'm commuting to work, or maybe while I'm doing chores around the house.
Exactly.
Those are activities where my mind isn't fully engaged anyway.
Right.
So why not fill that space with English?
Or you could read a few pages of an English book during your lunch break, or maybe listen to some English music while you're cooking dinner. It's about finding those little opportunities to weave English into your day.
It appears that even short bursts of immersion can be beneficial, as long as you're consistent.
Right. Absolutely.
It's about creating that cumulative effect over time.
The point is to make English a constant presence in your life, even if it's just in small doses. And as you become more comfortable with the language, you can gradually increase the amount of time you spend immersed in it.
Now, this brings up another important point. The idea of personalizing your immersive experience to suit your individual interests and learning style.
Yeah.
It's not a one-size-fits-all approach, is it?
Not at all. Just like with any, finding ways to make it enjoyable and relevant to your life is key.
Right.
Think about your passions, hobbies, and interests. How can you integrate English into those areas?
So if I'm someone who loves cooking, for example, I could seek out English language cooking shows, recipes, or food blogs to follow.
Exactly.
I'd be learning about something I'm already passionate about while simultaneously immersing myself in English.
Or if you're a movie buff, you could join an online community of English-speaking film enthusiasts and discuss your favorite films in English. The key is to find activities that you genuinely enjoy and that align with your interests.
That way you're not just learning English for the sake of it, but you're using it as a tool to explore your passions and connect with others who share your interests.
Right.
It makes the whole process much more engaging and rewarding.
Absolutely. And that sense of engagement and enjoyment is what fuels motivation, which is crucial when it comes to language learning. Motivation is what keeps us going when the going gets tough.
Speaking of tough times, it's important to acknowledge that creating a truly immersive English environment can be challenging, especially if you live in a non-English speaking country.
Right?
Access to native speakers and English language media might be more limited in those situations.
That's true, but it doesn't mean it's impossible. With a little creativity and effort, you can still create an immersive experience for yourself, even without constant exposure to native speakers.
So what are some strategies for those situations? How can you compensate for that lack of readily available English interaction?
Well, one fantastic option is to join online language exchange groups or communities where you can connect with other English learners from all over the world and practice speaking together.
Okay.
It's a great way to get regular speaking practice, even if you don't have many opportunities to speak English in your daily life. Another option is to leverage the vast amount of online resources available. You can find podcasts, videos, articles, and apps that cater to every imaginable interest and level. The internet has truly revolutionized language learning, making it more accessible than ever before.
It's so encouraging to hear. It feels like even in those situations where you might not have a lot of real-life English interaction, you can still create that sense of immersion by curating your online world to be rich in English language and content.
Exactly. So don't let geographical limitations hold you back. Embrace the possibilities that technology offers and create your own personalized English immersion experience.
Now, before we wrap up this part of our conversation, I want to touch upon another crucial element of immersive learning: feedback. It's so important to get feedback on your progress, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
But how do you do that when you're not in a traditional classroom setting with a teacher?
That's a great question. And it's true that feedback is essential for growth and improvement. Luckily, there are several ways to get feedback even when you're learning independently.
Okay, I'm curious to hear about these. What are some of the avenues for getting feedback outside of a formal classroom setting?
Well, first and foremost, don't be afraid to ask for feedback from any native or fluent English speakers,
Right.
They can provide valuable insights into your pronunciation, grammar, and overall fluency. Even just having casual conversations with them and asking for their input can be incredibly helpful.
Yeah, sometimes we overlook the resources we have right in front of us. It can be as simple as asking a friend or colleague who speaks English fluently to chat with you and give you some pointers.
Exactly. And in addition to seeking feedback from people you know, you can also utilize online tools and resources that provide automated feedback.
Like grammar checkers and pronunciation apps.
Exactly. There are also many language learning platforms that offer personalized feedback based on your performance in exercises and quizzes.
It's incredible how technology has advanced to provide such tailored feedback, even in the absence of a human tutor. It feels like we have so many more options for monitoring our progress and identifying areas for improvement.
We really do.
Mhm.
And in addition to these external sources of feedback, don't underestimate the power of self-feedback as well.
Self-feedback. What do you mean by that?
I mean, paying attention to your own mistakes and trying to identify patterns in your errors.
Okay.
For example, if you notice that you keep making the same grammar mistake, take some time to understand why you're making that mistake and how to correct it.
That's such valuable advice. It's about becoming more aware of our own strengths and weaknesses as language learners and using that awareness to guide our learning process.
Precisely. It's about taking ownership of our learning and becoming more active participants in our progress.
Now, before we move on to the final part of our discussion,
Mm.
I think it's important to touch upon the way we receive feedback.
Okay.
It's easy to get discouraged when we're constantly being corrected, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
How can we approach feedback in a more constructive and positive way?
That's a great point. It's essential to remember that mistakes are an inevitable part of the learning process. They're not failures, they're opportunities for growth. So instead of seeing corrections as criticisms, try to view them as valuable insights that can help you improve.
It's about shifting our perspective and embracing mistakes as stepping stones on the path to fluency.
Exactly. And remember, it's okay to ask for clarification if you don't understand why something is incorrect.
Yeah.
Don't be afraid to ask questions and seek further explanation. The more you understand about your mistakes, the more effectively you can learn from them.
Right. And it's equally important to celebrate our successes along the way,
Yeah,
no matter how small they may seem.
absolutely.
Every little victory is a step closer to fluency.
Every time you successfully use a new word or phrase or have a conversation in English, take a moment to acknowledge your achievement and celebrate your progress.
I think that's such a great reminder. It's so easy to get caught up in the things we still need to learn that we forget to appreciate how far we've already come.
Yes, and that sense of accomplishment and progress is what keeps us motivated and inspired to continue our language learning journey.
Well, I think we've covered a lot of ground in this part of our discussion.
We have.
We've explored a variety of strategies for creating an immersive English environment, from changing our media consumption habits to connecting with other English speakers to leveraging technology and seeking feedback.
Yes,
It feels like a holistic approach to making English a central part of our lives.
we certainly have. And we've emphasized the importance of making language learning a habit,
Right.
personalizing it to our interests and embracing mistakes as opportunities for growth. It's about creating a sustainable and enjoyable learning experience that fits seamlessly into our lives.
I hope our listeners are feeling inspired and motivated to create their own immersive English adventures, even if they're starting with just small steps.
I do too. We've talked about the power of surrounding ourselves with the language, speaking fearlessly, focusing on meaningful chunks, and of course, embracing playfulness.
And we've explored, some practical ways to integrate English into our daily routines, using technology to our advantage, and seeking feedback to guide our progress.
Mm,
But now in this final segment, I think it'd be great to get even more specific
yeah.
and dive into, some of the most effective techniques and resources that can really amplify our immersive experience.
Exactly. It's like taking all those foundational elements we've discussed and adding an extra layer of polish and refinement.
Yeah, it's about fine-tuning our approach and finding those little gems that can make a big difference in our language learning journey.
Right.
So let's start with the technique we touched upon earlier, shadowing.
Okay.
I remember you describing it as a really powerful way to improve pronunciation, rhythm, and intonation.
It is, and it's such a simple yet effective technique.
Yeah.
It involves listening to a native English speaker and repeating what they say as closely as possible. Almost like you're becoming their shadow, mimicking their every sound and nuance.
I've actually been experimenting with shadowing a bit since our last conversation.
Oh, great.
And I have to say, it's quite amazing how it helps you internalize the sounds and the rhythms of the language. It's like your mouth and your brain are getting a workout,
Yeah.
learning to produce those sounds more naturally and effortlessly.
That's wonderful to hear. It's really about training those speech muscles and getting them accustomed to the patterns of English pronunciation. And the beauty of shadowing is that you can do it with a variety of materials: podcasts, audiobooks, movies, TV shows, even speeches. The key is to choose something you enjoy listening to,
Right.
as that will make the process much more enjoyable and motivating.
So if I'm a big fan of a particular English-speaking podcast,
Yeah.
I could pick an episode, Listen to a short segment,
Yeah.
pause it, and try to repeat it as accurately as possible.
Yeah.
Paying attention to the intonation, the pause is the emphasis.
Hmm.
All those subtle elements that contribute to natural-sounding speech.
Exactly. It's about tuning into those finer details and replicating them as best you can. And the more you practice, the more you'll start to notice those nuances in everyday speech and naturally incorporate them into your own speaking.
It's like developing a more intuitive sense of the music of the language.
Precisely.
Now, moving on from shadowing, another technique I'm really interested in is active listening. It sounds like it's more than just hearing the words. It's about engaging with the material on a deeper level, extracting meaning and making connections.
It is. It's a skill that goes beyond simply hearing the words. It's about engaging with the material on a deeper level, extracting meaning and making connections.
So it involves a more conscious and focused approach to listening.
Right.
What would you say are the key elements of this technique?
Well, firstly, it's important to choose materials that are appropriate for your current level. You don't want to overwhelm yourself with something too complex, as that can be discouraging. Start with something that's slightly challenging, but still comprehensible.
So finding that sweet spot where you're stretching yourself,
Yes,
but not feeling completely lost.
exactly. And when you're listening, actively try to shift your focus from individual words to the overall message. Don't worry too much about catching every single word. Instead, try to grasp the main ideas and the speaker's intention.
So it's about focusing on comprehension and meaning making,
Yes.
rather than getting hung up on every little detail.
Precisely. And to aid in that process, I recommend taking notes while you listen. Jot down key points, interesting vocabulary, or anything that sparks your curiosity. It helps you stay engaged and provides a valuable reference point for later review.
Yeah, note-taking can really help solidify those new words and concepts in your memory,
Right.
make them easier to recall later on.
It's a great strategy for active engagement. And don't hesitate to pause the recording and rewind if you need to hear something again. It's not a race. The goal is to understand as much as possible and extract as much value as you can from the material.
It's about savoring the learning process and giving yourself the time and space to really absorb the language.
Beautifully put. Active listening, like any skill, takes time and practice to develop, but the more you do it, the better you'll become at extracting meaning from spoken English and engaging with it on a deeper level.
It's an investment that pays off in the long run, for sure, strengthening your listening comprehension and overall language fluency.
Now, in addition to shadowing and active listening, there's a wealth of excellent resources available that can complement your immersive experience and accelerate your progress. And I'd love to share some of my favorites with you.
Well, I'm all ears. I'm always on the lookout for new and engaging ways to learn English.
Well, one of my all-time favorites is language learning podcasts.
Okay.
There are so many fantastic podcasts out there these days, covering a wide range of topics and levels from beginner to advanced. You can find podcasts that teach you grammar, vocabulary pronunciation, even cultural insights.
Yeah, it's amazing how the podcasting world has exploded in recent years,
Yeah,
providing such a diverse and accessible source of learning for pretty much any subject you can imagine.
it really is. And the beauty of podcasts is that you can listen to them anytime, anywhere, while you're commuting, working out, doing chores, even relaxing at home. It's like having a personal language tutor in your pocket.
It's learning on the go, seamlessly integrated into your daily life.
Exactly.
And it's often so much more engaging and entertaining than traditional learning materials.
Right. Another fantastic resource is language learning apps.
Ah.
There are literally hundreds of apps available, each with its own unique features and approach. Some apps focus on vocabulary building, while others specialize in grammar or pronunciation. Many apps utilize gamification and other interactive techniques to make learning fun and engaging.
Yeah, it's like having a mini language lab right on your phone
Yes.
with personalized lessons, games, and activities to keep you motivated and challenged.
Exactly. And the great thing about apps is that they can provide instant feedback, helping you track your progress and identify areas for improvement.
It's like having a virtual language coach by your side,
Right.
providing guidance and encouragement every step of the way.
Now, in addition to podcasts and apps, I also highly recommend exploring online language exchange platforms.
Okay.
These platforms connect you with native English speakers who are learning your native language.
That's such a great idea. It's mutually beneficial. You get to practice speaking English with a native speaker, and they get to practice speaking your language with you. It's a win-win situation.
It is.
Yeah.
And these exchanges often go beyond just language practice. They can lead to cultural exchange, friendships, and a broader understanding of the world.
It's like building bridges across cultures
Yes.
through the shared experience of language learning.
Beautifully put. And many of these platforms are free or very affordable, making them accessible to learners worldwide.
That's great. It's another example of how technology has really democratized learning, making it possible for anyone with an internet connection to connect with people from all over the globe and learn from each other.
Now, one final resource I want to mention is online communities.
Okay.
There are countless online communities dedicated to language learning where you can connect with other learners, share tips and resources, ask questions, and support each other on your journeys.
Yeah, it's so important to remember that you're not alone in this journey.
Right.
Connecting with others who understand the challenges and joys of language learning can be so motivating and inspiring.
Absolutely. These communities can provide a sense of belonging, encouragement, and accountability, keeping you on track and reminding you why you started this journey in the first place.
It's like having a virtual cheerleading squad cheering you on and celebrating your milestones.
Exactly. So we've explored a wide range of techniques and resources for maximizing your immersive experience, from shadowing and active listening to podcasts, apps, language exchanges, and online communities.
It's an abundance of tools and approaches, all designed to help us create that rich and engaging English learning environment.
But I think it's important to remember that there's no one-size-fits-all approach to language learning. What works for one person may not work for another. It's all about experimenting, finding what resonates with you, and tailoring your approach to your individual needs and goals.
It's about embracing that sense of personalization and discovering what brings you joy in the learning process.
And remember, the most important ingredient in language learning is consistency. Even if you can only spare a few minutes each day, the key is to make it a habit, just like brushing your teeth or taking a shower. Those small, consistent efforts will accumulate over time, leading to significant progress.
It's about embedding English into the fabric of our lives, making it an integral part of our daily routine.
And don't be afraid to experiment, try new things, and have fun along the way. Learning a new language should be an enjoyable and rewarding experience, not a chore.
It's about tapping into that childlike sense of wonder and approaching language learning with curiosity, enthusiasm, and a willingness to play.
Remember, babies learn language through play exploration and a deep desire to connect with the world around them. Embrace that same spirit, and you'll be amazed by how much you can achieve.
Well, I think we've covered everything we set out to discuss today.
I think so too.
We've delved into the fascinating world of baby learning and discovered how we can apply those principles to our own language acquisition journeys. We've explored the power of immersion, speaking fearlessly, focusing on meaningful chunks and having fun. And we've talked about a wealth of practical techniques and resources to help create that immersive English experience that's tailored to our individual needs and preferences.
Absolutely.
I hope this podcast has left you feeling inspired and motivated to continue your English learning adventure.
Me too.
So remember, you have the power to create your own language-rich world, to tap into that innate learning ability, and to make English an integral part of your life.
Thank you for joining us on this exploration into learning English like a baby.
Until next time, on English Podcast Flow, happy learning, everyone.
If you enjoyed this episode, please like and subscribe. It really helps our channel grow and reach more English learners like you. By subscribing, you'll never miss a new episode, and by liking the video, you're letting us know you want more helpful content. Thank you for your support. It means so much to us.